All right. Happy Monday, everyone, and welcome to our very first inaugural session of our GameChanger VIP LinkedIn Live series. I'm incredibly excited to have the opportunity to host today's session. And I have alongside of me Michelle Weidman, who's our Chief Customer Success Officer at Dell Boomi, who's joining me today. And we are going to really orient the topic of conversation today all around how customer success can and will be a revenue driver in today's world. So really excited to kick off the conversation. I'll tell you, it's so funny how this came about. I remember when Michelle and I met for the first time, it was probably like 12 to 18 months back when she stepped into her role. As we were going through our introductions, we realized that we had a strong commonality across our previous professional experience, and that we both really we're kind of born and grown in the traditional sales side of the business, and we have made our way over into the customer success side of the world. So it was fitting that for today's conversation around sort of the evolving relationship of success and sales, that her and I came together and really shared our perspective, given the journey that we've both been on. So without further ado, I'd love to introduce Michelle Weidman, if you want to give yourself a quick background for the audience.
Sure. Hey, Kelly, thanks for having me today. I didn't realize I was the first participant, so that's uber exciting. And I think it's super awesome to hear, how people can make a successful transition from the sales side over to the success side. And, similar to you, I have been in technology software sales for 20 years until about 18 months ago, when I was actually asked to make the jump from being a VP of sales to our first ever Chief Customer Success Officer. And I'm thrilled to talk to you more about it today, because I think success can be a great home for a lot of different people, sales or PSO or pre-sales SEs, or even some of our support teams. So let's do it. Let's have more people find a home in success.
Yes, I love it. Great. Thanks for the introduction, Michelle. And I'll give a quick intro for those of you who I may have not met before. Kellie Capote, VP of Customer Success here at Gainsight. I've been sort of in the success world of Gainsight for the past 3.5 years, building out and scaling our enterprise success organizations. And then more recently in 2019, had the opportunity to really see over all of the success charter. And similar to Michelle, prior to coming over to Gainsight, really, I've spent 15 plus years in customer facing roles, but really started in more of that traditional sales role, then moved into more of like an account management, partner management role in leadership capacities, and really found my home and really my passion, I think, in success for the long haul. So to kick us off, I think really to set the stage and the backdrop for the conversation today, Michelle, I'd love to hear from you, like what really was the impetus, or how did you sort of make that jump from sales and sales leadership into customer success? And what did that look like for you?
Yeah, it was funny. It was about 18 months ago, and we had just wrapped up our fiscal year. And my COO reached out to me, and he said, hey. I said, hey, what's up? I thought I was in trouble or did something wrong. And he actually said, I'd like to offer you a job. He goes, we're looking at really elevating the success team at Boomi. We want to put more dedication and money into the organization, and we'd like for you to come over and lead it. And I said, oh, that's interesting. Let me think about that. So, I did a bunch of research about, what success is and how chief customer success officers are really starting to be a launch pad for CEOs, especially in SaaS companies. And, obviously comp was important too. And I know you've got some questions lined up for that at the end of this conversation as well. And the more I thought about it, the more I really thought it was a good fit. I still have nightmares from a QBR I was in as a sales rep in my early 20s in Texas. And I got called out by the regional VP because he said I focused too much on my customers and not enough on net new logos. And then fast forward a few years, and I was usually, in the top 5 sales reps, and they said, maybe she's doing something right. Maybe we should look at what she's doing and try to replicate that. So I've always been more focused on, the customer and making them successful. And, as a journalism major at heart, I'm just a really curious person. And I always wanted to know what my peers and the cross-functional teams were doing, so I could leverage that when I was the VP of sales for the East Coast to figure out how we could better serve our customers. So I think my ability to just play well in the sandbox with others and always have been really focused on how do we problem solve and make things better for, our customers kind of resonated with the exec team, and is part of the reason why they reached out to me to, tap me for this position.
I love it.
How'd you end up in success?
Yeah, great question. So I think similar to what you mentioned, being in the sales world for so long, account management, there's all these different naming conventions, if you will. I always found myself gravitating towards the customer and really seeing the impact and moving the needle in terms of value proposition and delivering outcomes. It wasn't so much like the initial negotiation or things that really got me energized. It was building those relationships, truly, demonstrating more of that trusted advisor role, and partnering with them for success. So interestingly enough, my story, it's kind of like, I got lucky, but I started to truly follow Gainsight in the market and what they were doing in terms of pioneering this industry of customer success. And I was at ADP for 8 years prior to Gainsight, and I was ready for a new change. And when I started really reading up about customer success, I'm like, oh my gosh, this is everything I want to do. And at a company that's just, honing in on customer success and teaching others about it. So I thought it would be pretty meta to have that opportunity. It was a lot of the same motions, right, in terms of driving incremental revenue, understanding, challenges and pain points, aligning that to the product, but really being able to zoom in on just that one side of the conversation and not as much, in terms of the net new lands. Yep. So I found my way to Gainsight, and really have loved every single day of it since day one. My husband still makes fun of me today that I truly love my job, and I can't ever stop, bragging about how lucky I am to be here. So that's how I ended up here. It was kind of by coincidence and intentional, in that I was one of those Gainsight followers and found my way into the organization at a really optimal time.
I think if that's the worst thing your husband can pick on you about, I would take that as a win.
That's the only one I'll share on this discussion today, Michelle.
Fair enough.
Well, cool. So kind of building on that a little bit more, Michelle, I'd love to hear from you, because I think everyone's trying to figure out what is the right profile for success? Who should we bring into the role? So given that we were both sort of cut from the same cloth, if you will, I'd love to understand what are some of those lasting views, from your previous roles that you've been able to really transfer into the customer success world?
Yeah, I think you said something that was really key when you talk about being a trusted advisor. And I really, emphasize to the team that that's what I would like for them to become. And I think when they found out I was moving over to the success team, the whole team that was in place probably freaked out. I think they thought, oh my gosh, this woman is going to come over and make us sales reps. And that is not my goal at all. I want them to be sales savvy so they can recognize when there is a new opportunity. But to bring in the skill sets that we had as AEs is extremely helpful. I mean, the top AEs are the ones that are out there, scouring annual reports, and they're tying companies' business objectives to how the Boomi platform could help them meet those objectives. So it's really, how do we make them feel comfortable as the trusted advisor by looking at those annual reports and by following the company's media and watching the interviews that our key champions are doing and showing the value that we add. Because, fortunately or unfortunately, I think a lot of people view salespeople as used cars people, and they go, do you want one of these? You want one of these? What do you got? And trying to really enable the team on the fact that you can really help identify incremental opportunities in a way that's not, sleazy or slimy or makes you feel uncomfortable, but is really adding value to their customer. Because if you truly are a trusted advisor, they're going to confide in you on their problems and what their goals and objectives are. And we can help, match how the Boomi platform can help with that. And then it just turns into an incremental opportunity versus, somebody feeling like they're a salesperson.
I love it. The one thing I would add that I've really found, it's interesting, my success organization here at Gainsight is kind of a blend of different backgrounds, but we do have a handful of folks that also have either, purely come from sales, or they've sort of had that blend of success and sales background. And the one thing that I've really been able to put my finger on is also just this notion of operational rigor, and they're a little bit more metrics oriented. I think in sales, right, you always have a framework in terms of pipeline and quotas, in terms of how you measure success, and bringing some of that same rigor and approach to the success side of things, I've really seen play out nicely. Yeah. In addition to just, understanding pain points and value selling and some of the other cornerstones of what we do day in and day out.
Yeah, and I definitely think that's where the tight cross collaboration within the cross-functional teams is mission critical. We spent the bulk of last year really working with our sales ops team on what we call rules of the road. And it is our plan and our strategy plan for our top enterprise strategic account deals. So we now have alignment with success and the sales team at 30%, because we have heard time and time again from so many of our customers that having a success team is actually a competitive advantage. And we've heard from customers that have said they've actually bought from us because they felt like we were going to partner with them from day one versus sell them something and then walk away. So having that sales motion that is complementary during the pre-sale cycle to help our sales peers win their deals, but then also ensure a smooth transition and handoff from the pre-sale cycle to the post-sale cycle to the implementation, and then the ongoing incremental growth and expansion of the customer is huge. And I think you're spot on. I mean, I think one of the things I've loved the most in the past 18 months in this journey is we have now had people come over from our professional services organization. We've had people come over that were pre-sales system consultants, and kind of like what you were saying, they enjoy the technical, but they didn't like the feeling that they were selling somebody something, but they wanted to help people out, and they found a home in success. And we've got some great people from our tech support team that have joined as well. And then obviously, with COVID, we actually moved 9 of our BDRs and a few of our ISRs over to the success team, because again, we heard from our customer advisory board that they wanted to double down on their existing vendors and were trying to do everything they could not to onboard new vendors. So we wanted to make sure that we could quickly pivot to help support our existing customers and try to find more incremental revenue and really make sure we were holding on to our existing customer base.
I love that y'all did that. So interesting. We did something very similar here at Gainsight when the wonderful world of 2020 smacked us in the face with COVID. We had what we deemed like a flex initiative to make sure that we were really anchoring around our top 3 initiatives from a company prioritization standpoint. So we were able to flex a few teammates from professional services, our account management team, into success. And it's been a really fun experience. Some of them are actually staying for the long haul now. And we've really been able to trade different skill sets. And I really think, raise the bar in terms of the way that we interact with customers. So building on what you were just mentioning, Michelle, I'd love to learn a little bit more. We're going to kind of get into the great debate that I like to call it in terms of success and sales and like sort of the ownership and responsibilities and division of those between the two. So would love to understand how that looks at Dell Boomi today, but even more importantly, how you think about it. So, where does renewals sit? How does your team get involved in expansion, upsell, cross-sell? And then really just more broadly, any, points of view that you have with regards to the topic.
Yeah. And, you guys were huge help with this when I first took over this role, because a lot of what I had to do was figure out what does the Boomi success team look like and how do we take it and grow it. And you all were great with matching me up with peers at other companies that I could talk with to see how they were set up to determine, what would work best for Boomi. And it was interesting because about 18 months ago, a lot of the organizations didn't have renewals underneath their success org. And we actually made the move this year where we did move renewals underneath success. And especially given COVID, I really think it was the best move we could have made. So with a lot of the salespeople that got moved over to success, along with working with our renewals team, we put much better operational procedures in place. And an example of this is, we've got 12,000 customers, which is, I think, a lot of customers. And we are now reaching out to review what customers don't have any components of their Boomi purchase deployed prior to 180 days before their renewal is done, and working with the renewals team to go after those folks much earlier than we had in the past, because those extra sales heads really enabled us to do so. And I'm really happy to say that, we were able to get 69 customers that had 0% usage, and this just started in Q2. So in Q2 only, 69 customers that had 0% usage to now on average have more than 61% of the platform deployed, which I think is a huge win, and one of the many reasons why, the renewals team and the success team needs to work in close collaboration so we can help each other pinpoint what are our customers that we think are at risk at churning, and how do we get in front of them earlier and really leveraging, the platform. The other thing that's been really helpful is identifying the customers that we think have the ability or the desire to really partner with us longer. So we used to not lead with multi-year renewal contracts, and now we are doing that. And that has been a massive win-win for us and for customers during COVID specifically, because so many folks are, I'm sure they're all going to the same, procurement training, are saying, I need a discount, give me my discount, where's my discount? And then getting people to commit to a 3 or 5 year renewal, we are able to work with them on lowering the renewal price increases. So it's a win for them from a cost perspective, and it's a win for us because now we've got a customer with us for a longer period of time.
Such a great stat and result from that experiment, Michelle. I love it. Just to put a finer point on it, one quick clarifying question for you. So is renewals a special, is it like a dedicated renewal specialist team today that partners with the CSM, or do you have the CSM directly managing renewals today? I see a blend of both across our portfolio of customers. So always love to hear how folks are doing this.
Yeah, this is definitely a heated conversation when it comes to this, and I know a lot of companies are experimenting with this right now. Personally, today, I know you're recording this, so my viewpoint on this might change 5 to 10 years from now, so don't hold it against me, but I really want to keep the success people the trusted advisor, and I don't want them to have to work or worry about negotiating pricing or contractual terms with the customer. I feel like in the trusted advisor role, customers are willing to share information that they're not willing to share with a quasi salesperson, even if it is a renewals person versus a direct AE. And I really want to keep that delineation in place. So we do have a separate team that is just focused on renewals and generating those invoices and working with the success team and even the direct AEs sometimes, because a lot of times the direct AEs will use the renewal time as a trigger to go in and collaborate a bunch of different incremental opportunities and try to position, a larger upsell deal at the renewal period. So it is a close collaboration between all three. It goes between, a bicycle to a tricycle, depending upon how a new opportunity is being, presented.
That makes sense.
What are you guys looking at over there? What trends are you seeing with customers? I'm curious too.
Yeah, for sure. So there's absolutely a shift happening in the marketplace that we're seeing in terms of the renewal function or the motion, like that, the renewal transaction itself living under success. So one of the latest stats I've actually seen from TSIA based on some of their recent research was that over 50% of success organizations today have renewals underneath their umbrella. Now, by how they're doing the renewal, it's still a little bit of a blend of whether it's a CSM owned transaction versus more of the model that you just shared, where there's an overlay or a renewal specialist team that's supporting that. Generally speaking, there's like a framework that we often like to use in terms of the fun question of who should own the renewal, and it's a 2x2, and really the two different dimensions that we look at is like industry maturity and product complexity can often help sort of, help you arrive at the answer of who should be owning that renewal event. So to give you one example, if your product is super, super complex and you're in the early years of really, evangelizing a new industry, most likely you're going to have a separate person running with that renewal motion. But the other side of the coin, if you have a product that's not super complex, it's more, plug and play, and the industry is rather mature, then you could have one resource really owning, both the renewal and sort of the adoption and outcomes motions all wrapped into one. I think the outside interview benefits is the customer experience piece. A lot of folks, especially in the SMB side, are trying to optimize for like less cooks in the kitchen, and how can we really streamline that experience from a customer point of view. And then the inside out like question that we're all trying to solve is, customer acquisition costs, customer retention costs, customer expansion costs, and how do we optimize for those so that we can grow and scale that motion, but in an effective manner. So there's not a one size fits all answer for sure, but the biggest shift that we're seeing is CS underneath of, or that renewals underneath of success. And then it just really depends on which resource is actually doing the transaction.
And you brought up a really cool point that I neglected to mention is I have to give our finance and our PMO team some credit. They're actually looking at a lot of RPA or robotic process automation on how we, make that renewals process less hands-on from a people person perspective. And that really has helped us scale the business as well. So it'll be interesting to see if more people look at that, as well as we look at this whole, what is success org and where does it fit and what are the people comprised of and, how are people paid? Because being such a new organization, which is, again, why I love working with you guys so much and the ability you have to introduce us with so many of our peers is to stay up to date on what everybody's doing so we can constantly make changes and pivots to, be more productive and do things that are the best thing to do for our customer.
I love it. One last question on this topic, and then we'll move on to some other topics. As we think about like expansion and lead generation, do you offer any type of like incentives today for your CSM team, and or do you have a segmentation model that's really oriented around, a certain cohort of customers that you really deem to have high expansion propensity?
Yeah, this is funny. This is definitely an area of focus for me when I came into this role. Is one of my first questions, since when I look at the comp for our success team, 20% of their comp is based on a kicker, and 10% of that is keeping customers and retaining them. And the other component of that is, selling customers more. So I reached out to marketing. I was like, I'm thrilled to be in this role. What does our strategy look like for going after our existing customers? Crickets. I was like, okay, what are we doing? And it was so funny because about 3 days after I took this role, we got a new director of lead gen and on our marketing side. And I went over to him and I said, hey, guess what? You're my new BFF and you don't even know it yet. So it's been a lot of fun working with them and being able to define that and what our customer journey is and getting their commitment to at least a monthly webinar targeted at our existing customers, because the way our platform is built, since it is a unified platform, there are so many easy, upsell, cross-sell opportunities that we really need to take advantage of. And now we're even working on more product qualified leads. So it's to enable customers that are leveraging the platform to be able to easily evaluate the other components of the platform as well. And that's been a fun journey. And the other thing that we have tried doing, and I've been calling this like our propensity to buy list, and this is where, Gainsight comes in really helpful, is, the teams never really talked as much before. And now that I'm kind of here and I like to play well in the sandbox, I said, guys, here's our list of, it was roughly, 600 customers of who we thought had a higher propensity to buy based on the fact that they had 80% of the platform deployed already. They had high NPS scores, and then they had a good sentiment, all of which we're leveraging Gainsight to track, which was extremely helpful. Now, we did have to take some customers off because, as you can imagine, right now is not the best time to go to a hotel or an airline and ask them to buy more. So there's some verticals that we wanted to take off the list so we weren't perceived as being insensitive. But I think that really helped. And I think the sales team really appreciated the fact that, success is trying to bring in new leads. And we also just launched last week a Boomi Champions program because we're really trying to beef up our customer advocates. Because let's be, completely transparent. Our best salespeople are our customers. So we're trying to empower them and give them a stronger voice to stand on. And the last leg of that is actually creating a referral program so they could come in and, give us warm introductions to other folks that they think would be a good lead for, Boomi.
That's great. Advocacy is such a key component these days to really the revenue growth piece. Something interesting that we did, which I'll just share with the audience, because I'm seeing a lot more of it as I speak with other executives, is from the segmentation side. really taking off some of those restricting factors of just, criteria such as solely customer spend as the way that you segment, and really doing that top down, bottoms up analysis to understand which customers which customers do we believe that have the most propensity to expand, maybe based on, ARR penetration today from an employee count perspective, customer health, et cetera. So that was one thing that we did differently this year, where we stood up a growth segment, which was really much more of a pod model across sales, success, our solution consulting team, and product, where we really tried to do a one-to-one mapping of an AE to a CSM to a solutions consultant to a product liaison, where they were working on the same sort of cohort of customers to really build that synergy and unlock some expansion potential. And we're seeing some early success. Obviously, COVID happened, so some of the targets are a little bit different than initial planning. But as we look at that compared to other segments, it's definitely the front runner, like from a net retention rate perspective. So just an idea to share with folks on the line.
Yeah, I think that's a great idea. And we've tried to do a lot of similar org alignment between our AEs and where their success people live. And we also, it sounds like similar to you all, have a dedicated, account management team that's, aims at growth and growing a certain amount of customers. And to your point, I think the more you can have collaboration between the sales team, the renewals team, and the AE team, and the SE team, and even the PSO and the partner team as well, the further you're going to get with a lot of these accounts.
Totally. Okay. So my next question for you, Michelle, is just given that so much of net new dollars are oriented and then come from the customer, like on average, it's around 30% of net new dollars. And then as an organization matures, right, that can be upwards of 50% plus. What's some guidance or tips and tricks that you have in terms of really, driving some of that change management within the success organization, of making it not just purely adoption and retention, but having them think about really the lifetime value of the customer and partnering with sales to drive some of that organic growth and upsell and cross-sell?
Yeah, we spent a lot of time in the past 18 months really focusing on onboarding. It's funny when you come over from the sales side, I think you have a lot of preconceived notions in your head of things you want to go after right away because you see problems that are in the organization. And that was one of the things that I think a lot of people really found frustrating, is that, when a customer first comes in for the first time, you have a BDR qualifying them. And then they're introduced to their AE, who's going to further qualify them when they go through a proof of concept or a workshop for the first time. And then you have the professional services engagement as well, where they're scoping out, the deal for the implementation, and they're asking the same questions. So the last thing the customer wants is for success to come in and ask those same things. So setting up an internal call to make sure we have all that documented and we're presenting it in the right way to say, these are your business outcomes. Can you please confirm that everything we have presented to you is the same as it was when you originally engaged with us? And then outside of that, it's also, okay, that's great. We want to help you achieve that. We want to ensure you're successful with that. But what does your North Star goal look like? And trying to get customers to communicate that early on to really set the stage for expansion earlier on in the sales cycle. Because we have our own internal metrics of, how long it takes until a customer buys their next purchase from Boomi, and how do we look at shortening that? And a lot of the onboarding materials is really dedicated, to that. And I do think it is really helpful.
I absolutely love that you just brought that up, Michelle. I feel like we've been talking a lot about this here at Gainsight. We call it operationalizing outcomes end to end. So really starting with the sales process all the way through. And really, I see that as the connective tissue, right, across the entire organization, where we're marching in the same direction, we're speaking the same common language, et cetera. And it's been a really big focus for a lot of our customers to figure out how do we do that and really systematize it as we go. Okay, so I know we're getting short here on time, but we'd be remiss if we didn't talk about compensation structures before we tie things off. So we'll end on a fun note here. So question to you, as you think about compensation models and structure for your team, what does that look like, and or any other ideas as you sort of re-envision the future?
Yeah. So again, being new to this role, this was one of the projects. It's funny, you come into this role, and since you are so cross-functionally facing, you kind of get bombarded by all the different groups about what they want you to change. And one of the people that came after me was HR because we had so many different job codes and job descriptions and comp packages, because success is such a new org that there wasn't a code, in place for the success team. Some people were TM, some people were as AE, some people were as business development managers. It was all over the board. And HR said, I would really like you to partner with us to help clean this up. And I said, absolutely. So I never thought I would be writing HR job description codes as part of this role, but that did happen for the first time this year. But it was actually a fun thing to do. And we're in the process of moving everybody over into an 80-20 plan, because we had some people that were on 80-20, we had some people that were on 70-30, we had some people that were on salary with IBP. And this way, the leaders and all the individual contributors will be comped on the same thing, which I think will really help just get us all swimming in the right direction. Maybe this is where my sales brain comes in, but I really do comp dictates behavior. So I think it's on us as a leadership team to clearly define what are the key things that we're looking at. And when you look at Boomi specifically, our 80-20 is the 20%, like I said before, is 10% is on net retention, and then 10% is on incremental. And I know that this is a hot topic amongst a lot of people right now as to what that comp component should be. And it's been some interesting dialogues with my peers in the industry on this. Do you factor in, an NPS score, or do you factor in a customer sentiment? And Kellie, this is where I'd like to hear from you, because I know you have exposure to a much larger audience than I do. What are you hearing and seeing? And I guess what are some of the things that you're like, that's kind of cool?
Yeah, absolutely. This is a fun one. This is one of the questions I love kind of riffing on in some of my executive check-ins with customers. So in general, I think just to start sort of high level, the general framework of compensation we are seeing, like the market average right now is around an 80-20 split, leaning more towards 70-30 if your CSM sort of charter does become a little bit more commercial. And then when you look at that 20 or call it 30% split, the big ones that I'm seeing across the board, well, I'll start with something that we started doing about 2 years back, which I think is a really interesting blend that leans into being able to effectively grow your customers, but it also drives the right behaviors in terms of your success organization. So what we started doing, like back in the early days, it was very much oriented around like adoption, right? And percentages increases in adoption of your customers base over time. And we almost think that sometimes there's this maturity curve where you have to build the right muscle first. So you may start for a short period just incentivizing certain behaviors, then move to some of those leading indicators, right? Like adoption. And then really where my team is at right now is around this notion of what we call a verified outcome. So going back to what you were mentioning in terms of understanding the desired business outcomes of your customer, and then mapping the work that you're going to do with them to ultimately move the needle. That's what we call a verified outcome. So it's saying, like, closing the loop and saying, hey, we rolled out a risk, mitigation process, and it was able to, increase or decrease red accounts by X percentage points. That would be a verified outcome in our world. So that's what we've historically anchored down on in terms of the individual portion of their variable comp here at Gainsight. We also do more of a team sort of metric that's more GRR and or NRR oriented. So where we have segments that are more expansion oriented, where they have that one-to-one mapping with sales, NRR really becomes more of the North Star metric, but we still keep a component of that being more of that individual verified outcome metric, because we find that it drives the right behaviors, and we've done correlation, and it's proven out to have strong gross and net retention results when we do have customers who have that. So generally speaking, what I've heard is like some type of team goal around whether it be net or gross retention, because sometimes there's just certain customers in your portfolio that you may not be able to control, that specific quarter. And then if you are going to layer in an individual metric, that's one that we're starting to see a lot more folks orient around in terms of the variable compensation, and then layering in accelerators and decelerators to make it a little bit more fun.
I like fun.
I like fun too. And our CSMs like money, right? So I think one of the things that I've often heard from my team is like, hey, I'm putting in the work, right? Like I'm making this customer right for expansion. So something that we've been really just, keen on and trying to think more about is how can we make those accelerators a little bit more compelling given the good work that they're doing, so that it's not just sales that reaps some of the financial benefits of the situation.
Yeah, no, it makes sense. Makes sense.
Cool. All right. Well, I think we are like maybe a little bit over our time here, Michelle, but this was such a fun and engaging conversation. Thank you for spending the past 35 minutes with me. Hopefully everyone enjoyed our first LinkedIn Live VIP series and that you'll join us for the upcoming events. Have a great Monday, everyone. Take care.
Thanks, Kellie.
Bye.